Hello and welcome to the Moms Who Know podcast. I'm your host, Chanel Nielsen, and joining me today is Suzanne Calton. Suzanne, how are you?
Great. Thanks for inviting me on your show, Chanel.
Yes, I'm excited to have you. So Suzanne and I know each other, but have not seen each other for many years. We were together as missionaries in Taiwan many years ago. And we were just talking about all the fun humidity and sweat and all the good stuff back in Taiwan. So Suzanne, I have kept up with her a little bit on Facebook and have been really interested at some of her family experiences and some of the things going on in her life. So Suzanne, if you could talk to us a little, just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your family and where you've been living and all that stuff.
Okay. So my husband and I both speak Mandarin because of that missionary work that you and I were just talking about. He served in Australia. So we've been living in China for the last 10 years, very long time.
Yeah.
And we have 2 older boys, and then we adopted 3 girls. And the youngest one, which is the one that you were calling me about, she recently just went through an amputation. So when we got her, she was 2.5 years old, and she had never talked or walked. So earlier in our conversation, we were joking that she was kind of our teen pregnancy because not only was she not talking or walking, but she didn't have any paperwork.
Oh, wow.
So she definitely was a teen pregnancy, but we saw her in the healing home after a surgery. And we just had this special feeling because with our other 2 daughters, generally in the orphanages, there aren't any males, especially tall, white, Caucasian, deep-voiced males. And so for our first 2 daughters, when they met my husband, they would scream. It was so hard. It was such a transition, right? And of course, they get through it, and this is very normal for Chinese babies. But when my husband walked into the room, I had just finished a tour with some women at the healing home. And I was waiting in a room with this little girl, Sunny, and I was waiting and he came to pick us up. And I said, well, do you want to come up? And he said, sure, I'll come up. And he came up. And when he walked in the room, I kind of wanted to see how this girl would react. And she started laughing when she saw him. She was so delighted. It was just this instant connection. And she had a bear that she was holding. And she wouldn't let anybody pull the bear away from her because she didn't walk. A lot of the other kids would take toys from her. So she held on to it really tightly. And so when I was talking to her prior to my husband coming, I would kind of tag it or pull at the bear just to kind of tease. And sometimes she would, smile, but sometimes she would really fiercely hold on to that bear. But when he walked in, she started giggling. She picked up that bear and she threw it at him, like just tossed it to him. And I was floored. I was like, that just happened. But she was laughing. And so he kind of threw it back and said, okay, are you ready to go? And is everybody all ready? And he threw it back to her. And then she threw it back again and started to laugh. And I grabbed my phone out and started videotaping because it was so unusual, not knowing at the time of anything that would ever end up happening, but just thinking this is such an unusual circumstance.
Wow, that's a really cool intro. Now tell us, so you said you were doing a tour at the healing home. Is that a place where you were working or what brought you there in the first place? Okay,
so I've been helping families just volunteer work to get connected with orphans and orphan care. And so when people come in town, they want that to be part of their China experience. And so I'll bring them to the healing home and give them an opportunity to serve there.
Okay, that's very cool.
Maybe just for a day or something.
Yeah, to have that experience. That's really neat. Okay, so that is so cool. So Sunny met your husband, and then how did it go on from there?
So, oh gosh, it's such a long, detailed story. Let me see if I can summarize. My oldest son just felt this deep connection to the healing home. We kept visiting. And he said for his birthday, he wanted to give his money to the healing home. And I wanted to make sure that his heart was pure. So I had him sleep with cash on Christmas Eve. And I said, this needs to be your decision. I want you to think about all the toys you could buy.
That's awesome. Because you don't want him to have regrets, for one thing, right?
I wanted him, well, I knew that if he did make that decision, that it would have a heavier bearing on his heart, knowing the contrast. And I know that I kind of placed him in a tempting situation. But I wanted the decision to be fully his own. And so he woke up, we unwrapped presents, and then he was happy helping all the other kids open their presents. Then right after he says, okay, it's time for the healing home. We went, he made his donation. His dad matched his donation and he signed for it. And he just felt like he had some ownership in all this. And then a couple of days or maybe a week or so later, we were in the car trying to figure out what we're going to do and going back and forth about nap schedules, as you know, right?
Yes.
And dentist appointments and things like that. And so we were kind of flustered about what we were going to do with our car and who was going to use it when. And as we were discussing, my same boy in the back row says, I feel in my heart, I feel the Spirit telling me that we need to go to the healing home today.
Wow. And when your kid says that, you go, right?
Arguing, right? So, I went to my dentist appointment. See how bad of a mom I am? I went to the dentist appointment and, the rest of them went to the healing home, skip naps. They were just like, they had to respond immediately. And so very proud of them for keeping their course. They went to the healing home and they had found out that she was scheduled to go back to her orphanage. I think that was on a Saturday. She was scheduled to go back that following Monday.
Okay.
And I've had that happen before where a family has been waiting for, anyway, I better not go into that, but we knew that we had to get back there immediately after that. And so that following Monday, I brought her home.
Wow. That is amazing. Yeah. That gives me chills. Just, it was, meant to be and how it had to happen right at that time. That's so cool. That is so cool.
Yeah. Yeah. But it was the teen pregnancy. We had no idea what to do. She wasn't registered with her orphanage for adoption. And basically she was a floating name and without any documentation really. And, I think of that song by Philip Phillips. Have you heard of that song? I think it's called Home.
I love that song.
Where he's like, I'm going to make this place your home, where I remember just going home with her and she's sitting in my lap and she's, watching out the window in a vehicle, which she's probably never been in a vehicle before. And she's scared to death. And we're just holding each other in the car. And just, I don't know what we're going to do, but we're going to make this work. I'm going to make a home for you and we're going to come together. You're going to have a family, and not knowing how that was going to happen at all.
Wow. That is so cool. So you mentioned she was 2.5 at the time. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And she didn't talk and she didn't walk. And so obviously she had some health challenges. So can you tell us a little bit about, what those were and then what led to the amputation? And did you know right away that she was going to need an amputation?
Well, it was an unusual case, and it wasn't until after the amputation that we learned that what made the case so unusual was because that she had had all these surgeries she had came with, I think, 7 surgeries before we even met her. And, all 3 of my daughters are spina bifida, but spina bifida, like the autism spectrum, you have some cases that are very mild and some that are severe. So theirs was occulta spina bifida, so very mild. And I didn't know if her leg situation was directly related or if it was just a deformity, but she didn't have, it was 2 inches shorter than the other leg, no muscle, kneecap the size of a dime.
Wow.
And we had already tried experimental surgeries to straighten it, but even if it was straightened, it would still be shorter. So they said that she would need surgery fairly frequently. And when she reached maturation, they would actually cut down the good leg. So there was some crazy ideas floating around. Yeah. And even then it was still somewhat experimental. And, if that leg was straightened, if we call it the lucky leg, if the lucky leg was straightened, then, best case scenario, they would fuse the shin to the femur and she would walk kind of with the leg bowed out. And if she ever fell over, she'd have a break in multiple places. And after 3 months after the first initial surgery, we went in, the screws had broken within 3 months in her knee. And so I said, well, what happens when the screws break? Oh, we'll just put in another set. And I said, well, if you put in another set, how often are we talking surgery every 3 months then? And that was the only solution they had. And I thought, gosh, that kneecap is going to be a sponge.
Yeah.
And there's a 6-week recovery. So she would be spending 6 weeks in recovery and 6 weeks having a normal life until she was 12, in which case they would do the fusing and shorten the regular leg. And so during the summer, sorry, this is kind of a long story,
No,
but
this
during
is
the
good.
summer, we were visiting my husband's best friend from high school, and his daughter was born with the same condition. Of course, not quite as severe as Sunny's, but they amputated at like 18 months. And this little girl was the same age as Sunny. And I'm watching all the kids play in the yard. And there's Sunny that, she wasn't even, they never even promised if she could ever walk. So, but of course at that point she was walking because she has bossy sisters that kind of pushed her up. But she was, hunched over when she walked, if that makes sense. Like it looked like she was, definitely affecting her hips and her back. And, I'm watching this other girl that's doing, somersaults, and she's running and she's sitting cross-legged and she's doing everything else the same. And I asked the mom, where do you compensate? Where do you have to adjust having a prosthetic? And she says, in no way. She goes, there's nothing she does different than her siblings. She can do anything with her prosthetic. And I thought, wow, what a life if she can just be able to engage in anything, right? Instead of trying so hard to straighten a leg and to shorten another leg and to, take a childhood away from her.
Right. And to go through so many surgeries and all these things. So yeah, when you see the two alternatives there, then the amputation does just seem like a much better way to go. But was that really hard as a mom to wrap your mind around? I know that. So this is different and much, a minor thing in comparison, but my 12-year-old son last summer, he knocked his front tooth out, his permanent tooth. He hit a metal thing into it and it just shattered into pieces. And that's a little thing. It's a tooth. It's sort of easily. He can't get an implant until he's 18. So we've got 6 years that we've got to figure something out. But anyways, even that, like losing that little part of his body was very hard for me as a mom. It was like, but he was perfect. Everything was fine. And to have this gone, I mean, this is a different scenario, but how was that for you as a mom, being like letting that part of her go?
Well, I kind of felt like we were the previous circumstance of her seeing her walk every time. It was hard on her body. It was hard on her body. And I never really knew to what extent until after the amputation. But I will tell you that the harder part, because I actually, after seeing this other girl, I got really excited for Sunny. And I was thrilled. In fact, when we were talking to the doctor about the surgery, we were saying, and he said, well, are you sure that you want to do this? And we were like, yes. I was so excited for her. And the harder part for me was talking to our friends about it because, of course, the faces fall and the energy changes and, I'm so sorry for you. And, just to tell people in advance and say, this is a progressive step. We're really excited for her. This is going to be a game changer in her life. And she's going to run for the first time in her life. She's going to stand up straight for the first time in her life. She's going to ride a bike. She's going to walk a mile and not need someone to hold her. This is huge for her. And we would just have these elated looks on her face. And I think that what your perspective is on the situation has a drastic influence on what other people think, and especially your child. And we had very open dialogue, and we said, this part of your leg is going to come off. It's going to come off. And we just were very clear about it. But we were positive, and we said, this is going to be a good move, but this is going to be off. And, all the other kids in the family were like, Sunny, this is so cool. And you're going to be the hopping champion. And they all started to hop around the house. And, of course, in between I would have these, I remember once being in the shower and just crying and, some of us are born with different lots in life, and watching her purity and her innocence and her optimism about it was amazing. Trying to shield her from any negative energy that other people, adults might feel, that was another subject. We didn't have a whole ton of it, but the weekend before we left for the surgery, I took the kids and we went and we just visited a water town outside of Shanghai and just, kept spirits up and kept our focus.
That's great. That's so good. I'm happy to hear that it was, you knew what needed to be done. And so you were able to keep that positive attitude. Did Sunny ever have any any qualms about it, or she was on board? She was ready.
That's a good question. Yeah, that's a good question. That was my biggest concern, is that, she was so positive. I just thought for sure as soon as she wakes up and she sees it's missing, then reality is going to hit.
Yeah.
But she woke up and several nurses said she is our favorite patient. And they would hang out, they would clock out, and they would hang out in our room all night. And it was so funny because she just had this magnetic, cheerful optimism that was so contagious. And so a few weeks after she was home, I was talking to my husband. I said, I think I need to talk with her and figure out what's going on psychologically, because it's as if she doesn't know that her limb is missing or something, So I was putting her to bed and I said, Sonny, do you sometimes wish that you had your long leg back? And she said, no, Mommy, I'm so happy that it doesn't hurt anymore.
Wow.
And I had overlooked it. I had overlooked that every time she was walking, she was in pain. And just in her perspective, she thought everybody felt this when they walked.
Okay. So yeah, it's been so much better for her.
Mm-hmm.
Have that. Well, what a sweetheart. I just wish I could give her a hug. She just seems like the sweetest little girl. Even hearing you talk about her, and I've seen her pictures, and I saw a video you posted of her walking on her prosthetic leg, doing awesome. So has she been able to pick it up pretty easily?
Well, she's definitely interested. And it was funny because when we tried the first prosthetic, just to try it on, it was a little bit short. And of course, she's used to having a shorter leg. So the prosthetic doctor was seriously, I have a video of him sitting on the floor in the hallway, kind of twiddling his thumbs because she wouldn't take it off. She kept going up and down the halls. And he said, you're going to get a blister. It's time to take it off. And she kept going. He said, does it hurt? And she goes, nope. And of course we took it off and she had this big blister, but she just kept pushing through. Now that she has the longer prosthetic leg, it's been more challenging because she's not used to having two legs the same length. So it's been a challenge, but I mean, these are the times where she shows us who she is. And it's been such an example to us of, just enduring it well, just being positive and happy. And she's made such an effect on the community.
That is so cool. And an effect on your family too. You guys just sound like you have the most amazing family. I love just the little tidbits we've heard about how your family has supported her through it and how, they've reached out to help her. I love that visual. I can picture, the other kids hopping around and just like, this is awesome, Sonny. You're going to get a new leg. That's so sweet. So, in the little bit of time we have left, can you tell us a little bit about things that you've learned? You've touched on a few, but like lessons that you've learned and how you're kind of going to be different as a result of this whole experience.
Well, I think as a parent, the best thing we can give our kids is confidence, right? And I think that when we first took her in and she started to walk and she never wanted to, be rolled around in a stroller, she would walk and she would fall. And people around her would gather, oh my gosh, oh, and help her up and get flustered. And I remember feeling this feeling in my heart that was a thought that wasn't my own, that we praise her getting up instead of putting the energy into when she falls.
That is so good.
And so when I'd see people in the public go rush to her, I would kind of motion for them to step back and let her get herself up. And I said, now you can give her a high five. And then she would smile and she'd be like, hey, I got a high five out of that. And kids appreciate that so much more than a look of pity. And that's something I've learned because that wasn't an idea of my own. I just felt like that came going through it and kind of watching her. And I thought, gosh, what an interesting thing to think about. All the trials that we go through in general, how we kind of sit in the trial a little bit. And there's nothing wrong with that because we need to feel and work through all of our emotions. But the energy needs to be focused on getting up.
Yeah. And then as parents with our children, that praise, that encouragement is for that. And I love that's what the focus has been. That's so great. Anything else that you would add before we close?
Well, yeah, I would think in terms of adoption in general, Sunny came at 2.5 years old and with a physical limitation. So a lot of times when parents take in a new child, it kind of throws the family balance off. And so what I've learned is in order to keep that balance in place, we need to share the responsibility. So the connection happens between that new child and the whole family and not just to the parents. So when Sunny needed her wheelchair loaded in the car, I could do it very fast. But I made sure that her siblings had the opportunity to do it and made sure that when she needed help putting her shoes on or whatever, that it was always a sibling that came through. So that way she felt that she was a part of the family instead of the nucleus of the family. Sometimes when adopted kids become the nucleus of the family, it causes resentment with the other children, and it also adds a burden to their own shoulders with having to deal with the pressure of being in this high profile position.
Yeah. Well, and I love it too, because that's really, I mean, your other kids have probably grown to love her so much more from serving. I mean, that's how we learn as a family, and that's how we grow and connect, is through serving each other. And our fifth baby is a lot younger than our other four, and our kids have been able to have that same experience with really serving him. And it's been wonderful for me because I get a lot of breaks, which is nice. But the kids, from the moment they wake up in the morning, they want the baby and they take turns with him. Aww. And, they are so good with him. All of them can do everything. Like you were saying, they can change diapers and they can feed him and they can hold him and play with him. And that connection that you get through serving each other, whether it's an adopted member of the family or biological, however we come together as a family, that service keeps us together and helps us connect for sure.
Right. And lets you as a mother recuperate.
Yes. Right? That's the added bonus. Yeah. I definitely like that shift. Yeah. That's a great thing. It's a great thing. Well, I love so much hearing about your family, and I've loved seeing them. What a great thing. And I'm really happy for Sunny and that she was able to get her new leg, and I wish her all the best with running forward through her future. So that is awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciated it, and I've had a fun time talking to you. And thanks everyone for being here. We'll see you next time on Moms Who Know. Subscribe to Moms Who Know so you never miss an episode, and join the conversation on Facebook at facebook.com/Moms Who Know podcast.